The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL, but we always encourage you to like and share these shows with all your friends on social media and with all your friends and neighbors, because it's time now for another step towards your life changing, because the following program also is not your everyday average run-of-the-mill conservative talk show like you hear quite often on this station. This is a very special program because independent insurance agent Rudy Howard presents each week at this time the African-American scene. In fact, he's ready to go and ready to roll with us right now, the one, the only Rudy Howard.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Always glad to be with you here on Wednesday night. You know, last night I saw two shows two things that were kind of very interesting. One was the Surgeon General for Joe Biden and Murtha. He was talking about loneliness. And there's a loneliness crisis in this country. And to my surprise, he said loneliness can be as deadly as smoking. That the human person needs to have interaction with other people. And it is a crisis. And I think that crisis has only gotten worse because of our political divides in this country. The other thing that you might be able, now that was just a report, but the other thing you might want to look at that I found extremely fascinating, there's a docuseries on HBO called Mixed. And they talk to mixed kids, whether it be Asian and Black, white and Black, and all other variations in between. And they asked them what it was like to be them. And then the most fascinating part of the docuseries is they talked to two older mixed people who explained what it was like growing up as a mixed person. I think it would be worth your while to just take a few minutes to take a look at that, because I think you'd find it very, very, very interesting. I won't say any more than that, but I will just tell you, take the time to look at it. And if you have mixed grandkids or mixed children, I'm going to suggest that that is a must-see for you. Your kids may be too young to see it, but it's a must-see for you so that you can have an appreciable understanding of what it's like to be raised in that world. One of the things that I can recall in reading President Obama's book was how he struggled with identity, being that he had a white mother and a Black father. And some of the special challenges that children have to survive when they are from mixed race parents. But yeah, please take the time to look at it. I think it's really educational for you, especially if you have mixed race kids. My number is 340-1590. That's 340-1590. I'm going to touch on, I've got an open mic tonight, but I'm going to touch on 4 topics, 2 of which are wide open, and the last 3 I have made some notes on. Topic number 1. What does loyalty mean to you? What does loyalty mean to you? Real interested in what some of you have to say. And part of what spurred this topic is the recent rash of Democrats who have jumped ship and moved to the Republican Party. I'm not going to go on a long diatribe about how I feel about that, but that's what spurred this topic. Item number 2. What is true friendship to you? What is true friendship? Item number 3, one of my most controversial topics for tonight: the history of abortion. And finally, topic number 4, conspiracy theories. And I'm going to approach conspiracy theories from a Christian perspective. But loyalty. What does that mean to you, loyalty? I'd be interested in your thoughts on that. I don't want to even poison you or influence you with my own thoughts, but I would love to hear what your definition of loyalty is. And that phone number is 340-1590. That's 340-1590. And the second topic: what is true friendship? Do you have a handle on that? I'm not sure many of us truly understand what friendship means and what is the commitment that is associated with friendship. What commitment is involved when you are a committed friend? To me, and let me make this editorial comment, that I have, as I've gotten older, become more withdrawn in terms of making friendships. And that's a byproduct of my life's experiences. Because at the end of the day, those who hurt you the most or cause you the most discomfort are far too often the ones that you're closest to, that you call, quote unquote, friend. Now, being a friend means standing by that person you call friend to try and help lift them up. That's not endorsing bad behavior. I'm not going to suggest for 1 minute that you endorse bad behavior, but if that's your friend, you want to lift them up. I'll give you an example, because there's far too many people I know like this that I've come to learn about such people over my lifetime. If you had a friend and Cliff called you up and told you that he saw your friend drunk on 25th Street, laying on the ground, what would you do? Now, I can tell you what 8 out of 10 of you would do. 8 out of 10 of you would pretend like you didn't get the phone call, or you would ignore the phone call completely because you would not want to be seen going out there to tend to your friend. That's not who Rudy Howard is. If Cliff calls me up and tells me my friend's drunk on 25th Street, I'm going out there. I'm going to yell at him and may even cuss him out, but I'm going to get him up off the ground, put him in my car, and take him to a place of shelter. There, I guarantee you, I guarantee you, 8 out of the 10 people listening here would not do that. They would make pretend like they didn't get the phone call, or they would ignore the phone call because they wouldn't want to be seen going out to 25th Street to pick his behind up off the ground. But if you're my friend, I'm going to get you up off the ground. And I'm going to try to take you someplace safe. I'm not going to take you to my house. But if you're my friend, I can't leave you laying on the ground. If Cliff tells me that that's a problem, I got to go try to help. And if I don't want to help, then that person wasn't my friend. Because you're afraid to be embarrassed, that your status in the community could be injured by virtue of the fact that you're going to see that person. Well, mind you, let's go back to the Bible. What did Jesus do? He walked among the lepers, and he saved the life of a woman of the night. He didn't leave them there. But you would. Most of you would. Now, there's people listening here right now that I know, and I know some of them, they would be out there lickety-split to try to help me if they could, but most of you would not. Just be honest, admit you wouldn't do it because you wouldn't want to be seen as some kind of negative association with that person that you called friend. Now, you should not sacrifice your principles for your friend. But if your friend is a robber and you know your friend robbed a bank, what would you do? Would you do nothing? I can tell you this, and I will not call a name because that would be improper. But I know a mother that turned in her son who was guilty of a violent act when he was a very young man. He's now free. But for more than 20 years, she stuck by him and worked hard to try to get him released. And eventually he was released. If your friend is a racist, how would you respond to that? Tell me, what would you do? What would you say? That number again is 340-1590. That's 340-1590. I can tell you, my white friends that know me very well would tell you, don't start a racial topic in front of Rudy Howard unless you are prepared to understand what it is that he's going to tell you. He's not going to let you get away with that because you know what? In my lifetime, especially since I've been in Florida, far too often, people of color allow people to say things in their presence that are offensive and say nothing in order to keep peace. I'm not going to do it. So if you do it in front of me, as my white friends will tell you, he's going to get you. So don't say it if you don't want to hear what he has to say. It's the way it is. And we have to do that because if you don't, you have set that person up for failure because you have quietly giving them a license that it's okay to say what they said. And that's just not the case. And one of the things that you have to do really carefully is to choose your friends. And I'm going to admit to you, my audience, that was a lesson that was way too hard for me to have to learn. People that I thought were my friends were not my friend. They stabbed me in the back, did all kind of, I endured the pain of that. Somebody that I cared deeply for just stabbed me right in the back. But and so at the end of the day, you get to where, like I was saying earlier, I've become more and more withdrawn because I value friendship so highly that I don't wish to engage in that so openly as I did when I was a younger man. That was a lesson that I talked to my son and his friends on my back porch when they graduated from high school, and I told them that they were all headed off in different directions, but you all have known each other since most of you were like in junior high school, and you should keep the bond because the bond you have is without ties, without circumstance. You guys knew each other when you really had much of nothing. And I am pleased to say, when my son got married, all those young men showed up at his wedding and talked about their friendship with my son Trevor. So I hope I've given you something to think about when it comes to friendship. And I hope, upon hope, that you see friendship the way I do. It is like a precious jewel to be protected and not to be squandered and not to be cast aside. So keep that thought in mind. Again, the phone number is 340-1590. I'm still interested in what does loyalty mean to you? I would like to hear what that means to you. Loyalty. Next topic. The history of abortion. That is probably the hottest topic in current day. That and guns. And we had another gun shooting today too. So let's talk about the history of abortion. Terminating a pregnancy was not always illegal. And it was, in many eras, in the early days, not very controversial at all. In colonial America, there were no abortion laws. Pregnancy was seen as evidence of illicit premarital sex, not murder. Now, let's talk about what has happened in those areas back there when I was a kid. I can remember very distinctly, and those of you that are my age will remember this too. They don't do it anymore. But you'd be going to school with Betty Sue and all of a sudden Betty Sue would disappear. And you wouldn't see her for a whole year. And then all of a sudden, Betty Sue would be back in school. And you wouldn't know what happened to her, but Betty Sue went to, yes, Cliff, Betty Sue went to a neighbor or family member, had her baby where nobody could see and where there was no stain on her in the community. And then she came back to her community in her neighborhood. I guarantee you, anybody my age will tell you they knew at least one person growing up that would disappear and that happened to. Guarantee you. Now, I'm guaranteed there's people my age know that. They don't do it anymore because it seems the stigma of that has kind of been erased. So the need to try to protect the child from that stigma is not as great as it was back then. In Connecticut, in the 1740s, a man was tried for a misdemeanor regarding a botched abortion, and the woman died. But I want you to understand this distinction here. In Connecticut, when they tried this case, the man was not tried for the abortion, not the fact that there was an abortion. He was tried for the fact that there was a botched abortion. Okay? Abortion back in the early days, in the first trimester, was very common. So historically, that was not something that was all that unusual, that there was an abortion in the first trimester of a pregnancy. Now, here's the one that I have had a pretty rigorous debate with a person about. When is the fetus viable historically? Now, I want you to think about this for a second now, because there wasn't always pregnancy tests. So when was a woman able to determine that she had a viable pregnancy? It was when quickening developed. I'd never heard of that until I was doing this research. Quickening. Quickening is when the expectant mother feels the baby kick. So a mother may not have been aware of the fact that she was pregnant until such time she experienced quickening. So now I want that to sink in for you, because that shouldn't be hard for you to grasp, because there was no pregnancy tests when I was growing up. So what was the method? The method was quickening. Put that away in your head, quickening. When that baby kicked around in the mother's belly, that was when that was identified as a viable fetus. Now, there's people that's listening right now that are going to go, no, 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 no. Listen to me. I'm educating you. And if you, before you call up all mad at me at what I just said, if you think about it, How could I be wrong? There was no pregnancy test, so when would they know if the fetus was viable? And that test at that time was quickening. Now, abortions carried out prior to quickening were not uncommon, and they were not controversial. Now, the benchmark way back then was once the woman experienced quickening, a subsequent abortion became something of a subject for debate. So again, quickening. And you know, I even asked my wife, had she heard of that? And she said no. But it just is such a common, I mean, really, when you think about it, that would have been the way that you would know that you were with child in many cases. So what kind of methods historically were used to deal with abortion? In many cases, they used a concoction of mixed herbs and things to come up with something that would make the pregnancy toxic. Of course, one of the things that was very prevalent when I was a young man is young ladies using foreign objects to try and abort the pregnancy. So why was abortion a methodology used in the past? One, as I said previously, was to avoid the stain of disgrace within the community of being pregnant outside of marriage. The second, and this is going to surprise you, because it surprised me in doing my research. One of the second biggest motivators for abortion was the fear of complications from childbirth. So I think if that's probably shouldn't be very hard for you to grasp when you think about some of the more severe cases of childbirth when they have neonatal units and those kinds of things that certainly didn't exist historically. And there was a pretty high rate of problems with women who were pregnant at that and back historically, because a lot of times those kids were delivered by midwives. So you would have mothers that would be fearful of complications from bearing children. Here's another really interesting piece of information. In 1835, the average woman gave birth 6 times over her lifetime. Imagine in 1835, the average woman had 6 kids. That's certainly not the case today, but 6 kids back in 1835. Now, here's one, well, before we get into this, I'm going to talk about abortion and enslaved women. But before we do that, I'm going to take a quick break. And don't you touch that dial. And again, that number is 340-1590. That's 340-1590.
Hi, this is Rudy Howard, your independent insurance agent. I now specialize in Medicare, health insurance, and small group insurance. That number is 475-8856. Same great service, more flexible hours. Just give me a call, 475-8856.
WPTV's First Alert Weather on WPSL is brought to you by Seacoast Air Conditioning, family owned and operated on the Treasure Coast since 1982. Online at seacoastair.com. Now with a look at our forecast, here's meteorologist Jennifer Correa.
Even into the overnight hours, we are mainly dry. Tomorrow morning, waking up to the 50s and low 60s. A nice warm up, though, into the afternoon hours with highs topping out in the low to mid 80s. We'll see plenty of sunshine for your Thursday. Rain chances nice and low over the next couple of days. Friday, highs in the mid 80s, sunny skies. And then as we head into the weekend, temperatures warm up a bit more. We'll top out in the upper 80s each afternoon with just a few showers and storms, but it won't be a washout.
I'm WPTV First Alert meteorologist Jennifer Correa for WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
Living in Florida is paradise until your AC breaks down. Seacoast Air Conditioning is family owned and operated for over 40 years.
Comfort crisis, don't roast, call Seacoast.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
We now return to the African American scene, presented each week at this time by independent insurance agent Rudy Howard, your host.
Now let's talk about how did society look at abortion for enslaved women? Now, the abortion process for enslaved women was tightly regulated. Main reason is those children were not theirs, but the property of the plantation owner. A slave woman who had an abortion could get locked up. So now if you think about it, those kids that the slave woman had were soon to be, over time, the work hands of the plantation owner. The Pure Food and Drug Enforcement Act of 1906 made it unlawful to transport misbranded or deleterious drugs that pertain to abortion. So that was passed back in 1906. Then moving forward, in 1973, Roe versus Wade, one of the most famous court decisions, where it made abortion legal. Now, I've had more debates about this than I would even care to try to count. And one of the things that really irritates me is when somebody says, you're pro-abortion. I am not pro-abortion. I'm pro-choice. I don't think it's my business, and I don't think it's any of your business to tell a woman what to do with her body. And not only do I think it's none of your business, I think it is a reckless, irresponsible economic burden that you don't want but you want to demand that she has. How dare you? You don't want to give, just look at what they want to do now. They want to cut food stamps. They want to cut aid for children. They want to cut that and cut this. But yet you still want them to have kids and don't care whether they have health insurance or not. Explain the logic of that to me. There is no logic that you can give me where that makes sense. You want to make women, or let's not just say women, make families take an additional financial burden they might not be prepared to handle. And your argument is, well, you have to protect that life. Well, okay, I'll accept that argument, but it's none of your business. It is none of your business. That is a decision that that woman makes with her spouse, her God, and her doctor. That's where that decision is to be made. It shouldn't be made by the government. Not at all. And we've got Brian on line one. I suspected you might call, Brian.
Yeah, you got me. Got me fired up.
Okay.
Because you're claiming that this is between a woman and her doctor. What she does with her body, but in most cases, it's not the woman's body who's killed. It's the preborn child who's an innocent human being. There's a human being who has as much rights or should have as much rights as you have.
So you're
being killed.
You're saying that child
we're having trouble with your phone there, Brian. Can you talk right into the microphone? Are you on a speakerphone?
Okay, what's happening with the phone?
Okay, it's like a speakerphone. Are you voice over IP?
No.
Because,
Nope, I'm not.
Because we're getting that feedback that happens when phones talk too loud. Well, they don't talk loud enough, and I try to turn it up to get to hear you, and it just blows my eardrums out. Sorry about that.
Okay.
All right, I'll try to keep the levels low enough so that shouldn't happen. Go ahead and continue.
Okay, I unplugged my headset in case that makes it. Hopefully that'll help.
Okay, so far so good.
So what I was saying is that in most cases, there are cases where the woman dies in an abortion, and that's the only case where the argument that it's her body would come into play. In most cases, it's the preborn child that's innocent, that hasn't done anything wrong, that doesn't deserve death, that is being ripped limb from limb. And when you say I'm not pro-abortion, you have to realize the choice you support is the choice for a woman to pay an abortionist to rip her baby limb from limb and to crush her baby's skull. And
that is such a grotesque. I've heard you say that before. That is such a grotesque exaggeration on abortion meant to shock everybody, but doesn't shock me because that is not even close to what basic abortion's all about. And I'm not pro-abortion. But that's a grotesque that is a grotesque description designed to shock everybody who hears it. That's what that is. That's shock value. That's
what happens with abortion.
That does not always be what happens with abortion. That is not accurate.
I have a friend that survived an abortion. And so sometimes the baby does live, but most of the time the baby dies.
Brian, if somebody decides to take an abortion related pill, is that ripping the limb from limb, crushing the skull as you described?
No, no, no.
Oh, okay, all right.
Type of abortion, and that type is happening more often today. And what
It
you
is,
have
it
is
is,
women actually delivering
Brian,
dead.
let me educate you. More than 50% of all of abortions that are done today are done that way.
Yeah, when it wasn't a chemical abortion, the women were lied to and told this is just a blob of tissue. It's not really a person. It's not really a human being. Now they're actually seeing their own child coming out in the toilet. They're delivering their own child in the toilet, and the toilet water washes away the blood, and they can see the hands, they can see the feet, they can see the arms, they can see the legs, and they know that they participated in the murder of their own preborn child. Women are calling up pro-life pregnancy centers and even sometimes even coming into the pro-life pregnancy centers with a dead baby in their hand that they delivered on their own toilet. This is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. You like to talk about all of the bad things that happened in the past, which is good. We need to learn from those things in the past. But this is the stand right now. And you do not have the courage to stand for the innocent who are being destroyed by abortion.
Oh, don't question my courage. You've known me long enough to know if I believe in something, I will stand in the pits of fire and stand by what it is that I believe. And it's not a lack of courage. Here's why. Here's my problem. And I think you and I have had this discussion before. You're pro-birth. You're not anti-abortion. You're pro-birth. You just want the babies to be born, and after they're born, you don't give a damn about what happens to them after they're here. And that's what separates me from you. I care as much about them after they're here as you care before they're here. And I have challenged more than one person. You're so pro-life. What have you ever done to try to help somebody? And I won't put this on you because I know you have, but most people say that and they've done nothing to try to help the baby after they're here. And don't tell me adoption, because adoption is not always the answer. There's kids sitting somewhere right now that can't be adopted because there's no family to adopt them.
Well, I have plenty of friends that have adopted babies, and I have a Choose Life license plate on my vehicle, and the extra money I voluntarily pay extra money.
I'm not questioning you. I've known you long enough to know that you do.
Medical bills and the living expenses of women that choose to give their baby up for adoption.
I'm not challenging you because I've known you long enough to know that you do that. And if you know me long enough to know, I have worked in Little League. I have sat with mothers and tried to counsel them with their kids that were trying to get out of high school and go to college. Oh, I have done my share too. So it's not like, but I care as much after they're here as before they're here. Do you want them to have health insurance, Brian? Is it okay that a baby, wait, let me finish. Is it okay that you bore a baby into the world and they have no health insurance to be able, for the mother to be able to take care of them? Is that okay with you?
We cover when people in America do not have the means to take care of their medical expenses. We actually pay those. The taxpayers do pay that. I don't know if you realize that, and I don't know if you realize it, but I know you do. I'm kind of asking this as a rhetorical question, but you do realize that Obamacare was passed.
I understand that. And ever since it's been passed, you've been trying to get rid of it.
Well, actually, the House Republicans tried to get rid of it until it could actually pass the House and the Senate, and Trump would have signed it. Then all of a sudden they stopped trying to get rid of it.
But the point, here's the point. With this current negotiation on the debt ceiling, just take a look at the things that they want to cut. And the things that they want to cut would be most injurious to poor, to lower middle income families. But at the same token, you say, bring the baby here. The baby has a right to life. Okay. And you know what? I've said this before too. I think if you could prove to me, if Republicans could prove to me that they were as passionate about the children after they're here than before they're here, they could possibly make me a convert. But until that happens, you can't convert me, because otherwise you're just a pro-birther, not a pro-lifer.
Rudy, will you go with me next year to CareNet's banquet? And you will actually see people in an organization that does what you're advocating for, and hopefully you'll be a man of your word, and you'll change your position, and you'll seek to start protecting every innocent human life.
Well, I will consider attending that with you. I'm not sure what they could tell me that's going to be different than what I've just said, because if you show me a room full, there's a room of 100 people there, and you got 100 people in there who talk about how they care about life after the baby's born, that is hardly representative of what it takes to make a difference for society as a whole. But if you invite me, I will certainly come.
Yeah, the baby that they featured this past year was actually adopted, and they had the adoptive parents there, and the baby was from a client from CareNet, and there was another young couple that couldn't have children that wanted to adopt, and they adopted this baby, and they're going to care for this baby for the rest of that baby's life.
Yeah, Brian, but you know what? Have you ever seen the Adoption Festival? Have you ever seen that?
I've heard you talk about it.
Mm.
But that's not an excuse to kill babies.
Brian, I sat there. I'm not offering as an excuse. What I'm saying is, I sat there. You heard me talk about it, because I sat there and the tears ran down my face as I watched those kids asking for somebody to love them and take them away from there. What kind of life is that? Is that a horrible life or what? Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Now, and here's the other thing too, Brian, and get this one too. Do you know that if a kid is in foster care after the age of 18, if the parents who are his foster parents choose not to keep him anymore, they're on their own, because the parents don't get paid anymore. Did you know that?
I did, yes.
Oh. So what happens to that kid? Those are the issues that I have. What happens to that? What happens to that kid?
That kid at least isn't being killed. Wasn't killed by abortion.
But what happens? But what, Brian? Tell me, what happens to the kid? I can tell you, and I think you'd say the same thing. You come from a strong mother and father. Could you take care of yourself at 18?
Well,
The
it
answer is
would have
no.
been difficult, but
You
yeah,
couldn't have taken care of yourself at 18.
I could have, and you could have. And when people are in difficult situations, people do phenomenal things. It wouldn't have been easy, but I could have, you could have. God has created us where we are capable of doing way more than what we normally would do if it is needed and when it's necessary.
Okay, that that's a cop out, right?
It's not a cop out.
It is. That is, Brian. That's a cop out because you're an intelligent guy and I'm an intelligent guy, and I can tell you for sure at 18, I went away to college. I was barely ready for that, let alone to be thrown out on the street at 18 and say, "Take care of yourself, Rudy." I was totally inept and would unable to be able to do that at 18. And neither would you if you're being honest. And therein lies my problem. So now how many CareNet banquets that I go to, I'm going to have the same concern because I'm concerned about that kid that ages out of foster care at 18 and has nowhere to go except the street.
That doesn't justify killing preborn children.
There's
nothing that justifies killing preborn children.
Well, you can say, well, that's your argument. I accept your argument, and my argument is, why are we going to place that burden on society for that child that can't take care of themselves? Why are we doing that? Just because you want, just because you want that person to live and doesn't matter about the quality of their life? That doesn't matter. That doesn't, that quality of life has no place with you.
Killing preborn children is not a solution, and there's no excuse that can justify it.
Okay. Well, all right. This was a very good debate, Brian. Always. We're coming to the end of the hour. I never got to my last topic, which was conspiracy theories, which I will get back to next week because I approach conspiracy theories from a Christian perspective. And I think you might be interested in what I have to say, but I'd like to thank you so much for listening to the African American Scene. God bless and be safe, and I will see you next week right here for the African American Scene.
The African American Scene with Rudy Howard, independent insurance agent Rudy Howard. Every Wednesday evening on WPSL in the 6 o'clock hour with archives on YouTube. Just go to WPSLTV.com. This is WPSL, Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.